You ever watch someone get humiliated in public, calm, composed, and still accused of theft, only to find out 5 minutes later they own the whole building? Well, this isn't that. This is worse. Because the building was a plane at 30,000 feet, the humiliation was filmed, and the man they profiled, he didn't just own the seat. He owned the airline, and the moment he stood up, everyone else had to sit down and face what they'd been flying on: quiet, polished, first-class discrimination. And if that first moment already has your heart racing or your fists clenching, don't scroll past it. Like this video, drop a comment with your city and hit subscribe if you believe it's time we upgrade more than just legroom. This story's got receipts. Let's fly. It all started with 6 words. This ticket must be stolen, sir. Not good morning. Not can I help you. Just 6 cold words slung like a blade by flight attendant Sophia Bennett. Henry Carter hadn't said a thing yet. He was just standing there, hoodie, jeans, clean sneakers, holding his first-class boarding pass like it was a passport to a world that still didn't want him in it. And let's be clear, it wasn't just her tone, it was the silence that followed. The way the businessmen in 1B paused mid-sip to watch, the way the cabin's murmurs shifted, the way judgment slid in with no ID required. But the real twist? Henry didn't flinch. He didn't yell. He didn't even blink. He handed her the boarding pass like he'd handed out contracts. Calm, lethal, final. Sophia barely glanced at it. You're not on the manifest. Her voice already sharpening, already bracing for a fight she thought she'd win. But Henry didn't budge. That's my name. That's my seat. I paid. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Lucas Reed, the lead attendant, joins in, tablet in hand. He's not listed, he says. Not let me double-check. Not let me verify. Just an assumption printed in real time. Then, from across the aisle, it got worse. Ethan Ward, a corporate climber dipped in smug, leans in and says, "He probably stole the ticket." Just like that. No shame, no facts, just race clothing and the confidence of never being questioned. Now imagine that happening to you. In front of a full cabin, with cameras off, with no proof, with your name in the system, but no one willing to scroll one more line to find it. You'd lose it, right? You'd shout? Not Henry. He just stood still. Because power doesn't have to announce itself. It just waits for its name to be called. And trust me, the call was coming. But before that, Mateo Cruz, Henry's assistant, pulled out a phone. Quiet, subtle, recording. Then came Harper Lee. Black, journalist, 3C, camera already up, lens steady. They weren't waiting to go viral. They were documenting the storm before it hit. Sophia kept pushing. Your platinum card was rejected at the kiosk. Henry answered, voice flat. Your system is broken. I'm not. That line didn't just cut. It landed. You could feel it ripple down the aisle, because everyone watching now had to pick a side. Truth or training, dignity or delay. And when Sophia told him to move to the back of the plane, Henry didn't move an inch. If you touch me, I promise you'll regret it. No threats. Just fact. Just tone. Just a man holding the line between patience and policy. Mateo said, audio's rolling. Harper said, this keeps happening. Ethan said, you people always play the race card. And Henry? He said nothing yet. Because he knew what was coming. He had lived this flight before. Not this route, this reality. At 22, he was told joggers weren't welcome in business class. At 24, mistaken for a delivery boy at his own company. At 26, redirected at a VIP lounge while his face was on the conference banner outside. So when they questioned if he belonged in 2A, they weren't just challenging his presence, they were poking the bear of every quiet indignity he had carried to the top of an industry that now flew on his checkbook. Sophia didn't know, Lucas didn't know, Ethan definitely didn't know, but Harper knew. She leaned forward and said, he hasn't raised his voice, he hasn't threatened anyone, and he's standing in front of a seat with his name on it. And still, the cabin leaned toward fear. Still, authority played hot potato with the truth. Still, Sophia folded her arms like policy could shield her from proof. Henry stood taller. "You just made the worst mistake of your career, Ms. Bennett, and I'm going to correct it right here, right now." Matteo's fingers flew across the phone. "Text sent," he whispered. "Verification with corporate in 4 minutes." Harper kept recording. Ethan rolled his eyes. Jack Hayes, 1D, said, "This feels off. I'm speaking to the captain." Matteo timestamped it. 8:17 a.m. That's when the atmosphere shifted. Not because of shouting, not because of conflict, but because the man in the hoodie stopped asking to be seen and started reminding them who he already was. And the best part? They had no idea. None. So stay with this story, because what happens next isn't about just getting a seat back. It's about exposing how many people are flying high on unchecked bias, and how one calm man with a camera, a boarding pass, and 40% of the airline burned that lie mid-air. If that hit something in you, if you've ever been looked at sideways because of your name, your clothes, your silence, hit that like button now. Share this with someone who needs to remember that quiet dignity isn't weakness. And subscribe, because of this flight, it's just about to take off. The moment Jack Hayes stepped toward the cockpit, you could feel the authority shift. He wasn't loud, he didn't raise a hand. But the man had flown long enough to know the difference between a seat glitch and a civil rights violation unfolding at 35,000 feet. His words were soft but packed with power. "Let me speak to the captain." And when he disappeared behind the curtain, the silence he left behind was more explosive than any argument. Because now it wasn't just Henry standing his ground. It was Truth getting a co-signer with a silver medallion frequent flyer tag. Sophia's fingers danced nervously across her tablet, as if the screen might magically confirm what her bias had already decided, but the software didn't care about her instinct. It froze, spun, then displayed the same empty manifest. "He's not in here," she said again, voice cracking slightly. And that's when Henry leaned toward Matteo and said calmly, "Text the number, begin verification with corporate, make sure it's on speaker." Matteo nodded, tapping with quiet precision. That wasn't just a request. It was a warning shot dressed in Bluetooth, and in the third row, Harper whispered, "Oh, this is getting serious." Her camera never blinked. 3 minutes later, Jack returned with an edge in his voice. "The pilot says double-check the printed manifest. The electronic one's missing multiple updates from the gate," Sophia scoffed. "We can't rely on pre-tep lists. Those get printed before last-minute changes." Jack folded his arms. "Then your system's broken." A slow nod from Henry followed. "But I'm not." The metaphor landed so hard even the overhead bins looked like they flinched. At that point, you'd think any rational person would pause, reevaluate. But no, Ethan had to chime in again. "This is insane. Just remove him already." That's when Harper spoke without looking up. "Say that again. Louder. For the lawsuit." Her tone was as smooth as silk, but sharp enough to draw blood. Then it happened. Matteo's phone pinged with a corporate verification code. He opened the message, read the internal tag, and whispered, "It's done." Henry nodded. "Read it." Matteo cleared his throat. "Board liaison confirms Henry Carter, seat 2A, clearance level, executive shareholder. Verification complete." That single sentence landed like thunder in a clear sky. Every face turned. Sophia froze. Ethan's mouth hung slightly open. Lucas, who had been leaning against the galley wall like it was holding him up, straightened with a jerk. "Wait, shareholder?" he repeated, voice trembling. Henry didn't gloat. He didn't smirk. He simply reached into his bag and pulled out his identification. Folded. Government issue. Next to the boarding pass, it was undeniable. No room left for theories, guesses, or policies dressed as prejudices. "I own 40% of Skylight Airlines," he said plainly. "You're looking at a man who built a company you get paid to serve." Sophia's eyes darted between the ID and her tablet like she was trying to find an escape route through an error message. But the numbers didn't lie. And neither did the silence that followed. Except silence wasn't safe anymore. Harper was still recording. Matteo was still logging, and Henry was just getting started. The emotional swing inside that cabin was brutal. 10 minutes ago they saw a hoodie, now they were staring at a king in cotton. And suddenly the turbulence wasn't in the air, it was in their ethics. Lucas muttered, "We had a training note. About appearance. Baggy clothes. Hoodies. Just red flags." Henry's voice dropped. "Steel under velvet." "Say that again." Lucas blinked. "Nothing." "No," Henry said. "You said red flags. Baggy clothes. Is that your internal protocol?" Lucas didn't answer. He didn't have to. Everyone heard it. Everyone felt it. And that's when Jack, ever the quiet compass of the room, spoke up. "That's not protocol. That's discrimination. And it's costing you more than your credibility. It's costing your soul." Sophia backed up, arms crossed, eyes hollow. "It's not profiling. It's intuition." Henry turned slowly. Intuition doesn't accuse passengers of theft without checking IDs. Intuition doesn't tell a man in jeans he doesn't belong. That's not your gut. That's your fear talking, dressed up in authority. Then Matteo added, without looking up, "And fear doesn't hold up in court." Harper, still holding her phone locked in the moment, "Just admit it," she said, voice low. "You saw a hoodie and forgot to see the human." But this wasn't just about Sophia anymore. It wasn't about Lucas or Ethan either. This was about every crew member who'd seen a name and made a judgment before scanning the barcode. Every silent nod in back rooms when someone said, "You know the type." This was about a system that let whispers guide policy, then blamed the glitch when caught red-handed. And Henry? He wasn't just calling it out. He was dismantling it, line by line, log by log, flight. If you're still watching this and feeling something, don't let it fade. This isn't about a seat. This is about how many people get downgraded in life because someone else didn't want to scroll further. If you've ever been misread, mislabeled, or mistreated, just because you wore comfort instead of conformity, drop a comment, hit subscribe, and share this story. Because this isn't about Henry's 2A anymore. It's about the millions of seats people are still being told they don't belong in. And maybe, just maybe, if we keep exposing the manifest lies, we'll start seeing each other for who we truly are, not what someone else is afraid we might be. Henry's ID sat on the edge of the galley cart like a loaded statement. His name, his seat, his ownership, unfolded in full view. But what happened next didn't come from the mouth of management. It came from the nerves of fear. Sophia, barely holding it together, crossed her arms and tried to reclaim control. "Anyone could print that. We've had fake IDs before." Her voice was firmer than her footing, and in that second she'd just doubled down on the worst poker hand in aviation. Henry didn't blink. "Scan it, cross-check it, or don't. Either way, your next 30 seconds will outlive your career." That threat wasn't shouted, it was simply stated, as inevitable as a sunrise. But it was Ethan Ward, sitting smug and stiff in 1C, who tried to breathe life into Sophia's retreat. "He's bluffing," Ethan scoffed. "Nobody like him owns anything like this. Hoodies don't write paychecks." That's when Jack Hayes stood again, quiet but commanding like a storm dressed in khakis. What if he's not bluffing? What if he doesn't need a briefcase because he owns the jet? And for the first time, even the frequent flyers forgot to check their email. They were watching something shift that no points program could predict. Lucas tried to stabilize the moment. "We were trained. Patterns sometimes match fraud profiles. We look for them." His voice cracked under the weight of every suppressed report, every avoided apology. Henry turned slowly, one eyebrow raised. "So, what's the fraud code for hoodie and calm voice? What's the profile tag for black and breathing?" Lucas swallowed hard. Harper filmed from her seat, her lens steady as a sniper. "We're watching you lie to cover a rule you never wrote down but always followed." That was the moment you could feel the crew's instinct waver. Authority now had witnesses, and accountability was recording in HD. Sophia reached for the galley phone, her last card. "Fine, I'm calling security." But she hadn't even lifted the receiver before Henry's voice cut through the cabin like a legal memo with teeth. "If you call security, I'll make my first executive action to remove you before they get here." And for a moment, it looked like she might hang up. But then, unexpected twist. She pressed the button. Her voice echoed through the handset. "Personnel support requested. Disruptive passenger." The words didn't land like an order. They landed like a lawsuit. Matteo looked up, phone still recording. "You all heard that? She just called security on a verified shareholder." The cabin shifted from awkward to electric. Jack Hayes exhaled sharply, stood up again, and addressed her directly. "This is harassment, and you know it." Sophia didn't respond. She couldn't, because denial doesn't hold up well in front of 12 witnesses and a high-definition timestamp. Ethan muttered something under his breath. Harper raised her phone toward him. "Repeat that," for the lawsuit. And he actually flinched. That was the shift. The moment privilege stopped being invisible and started feeling the heat. For once, Ethan looked cornered, not by Henry, but by truth. And Sophia, she was about to learn that silence isn't safety, it's just delay. Lucas whispered toward Sophia. "Just tell them he's not on the manifest." But even Lucas wasn't sure anymore. Sophia nodded, then paused as a new slip of paper was handed to her, fresh off the printer. A quiet update, a loud correction. She read it, blinked, and froze. "Carter, Henry, seat 2A, verified." You could hear the air change. No one breathed. Harper zoomed in as Sophia's defenses crumbled like a system that had just been rebooted with facts. "I don't understand," she whispered. "It wasn't there before." Henry, still calm, still grounded, answered her. "Because you moved it, and now that it's back, so is the truth." The final twist of that moment wasn't the manifest update. It was the fact that Sophia couldn't even explain it. Not because it was complicated, but because it was simple. She had flagged his seat. She had pushed the button that erased a name. And that button? It only existed because someone built it with bias in mind. She turned toward Lucas. "I just marked it for re-verification." But Henry didn't let it slide. "You accuse me of theft in front of witnesses with no evidence? Based on a seating error you created." Her lips parted. No excuse ready. Because how do you defend calling someone a criminal with a smile? Harper's voice came low, almost kind. "You can fix it, but not with silence." And Henry? He took one breath, one pause, then spoke. "The problem today wasn't tech, it was trust. You trusted your gut more than my name. You trusted your pattern more than my pass, and you trusted fear more than the facts." The truth landed, and for the first time, you could feel something shift, not just in the cabin, but in everyone watching. Because we've all seen it, maybe lived it. The brush-off, the recheck, the sudden doubt that somehow never happens to passengers in suits and shiny shoes. If you've ever been second-guessed before you said a word, ever been flagged by nothing more than your fit, your tone, or your skin, then this story isn't just about Henry. It's about you. And right now, it's your turn to do what Sophia didn't. Face the facts, admit the pattern, and call it out. So, like this video, comment if you've ever been misread by the rules, and subscribe, because what's coming next in this story makes everything up to now look polite. This seat just spoke back. And the cabin, it's finally listening. Silence blanketed the cabin, thick and electric. Sophia stood motionless, the verified manifest trembling in her hand like a verdict she never expected. Her mouth opened, but the apology never came. Instead, she pivoted to deflection. I didn't mean to, but Henry didn't flinch." "Didn't mean to what?" he asked, each word steady, each syllable like a courtroom gavel. "Didn't mean to profile me. Didn't mean to accuse me of theft without checking the manifest you altered." Sophia's lips pressed together, her voice cracked. "I thought I was doing the right thing." That's the line. The same line that's been used to justify broken systems, bruised dignity, and blind assumptions. Thought, right, thing. But this time, Henry didn't let the moment slip into softness. He turned to Matteo. Log that statement. Misclassification. Public accusation. 8:19. I am. Mateo tapped his screen. The log was live, every word, every breath stamped and uploaded. Then Ethan, still slouched and sour in his leather throne, decided to inject one last shot of smug. What's next? You gonna fire her right here in front of all of us? He chuckled like someone who still thought the rules only applied to others. Henry turned slowly, not with anger, but with absolute clarity. Actually, Mr. Ward, that's exactly what I'm going to do. And just like that, the hoodie became the hammer. Sophia gasped. Lucas's face blanched. The front row passengers tensed like a storm had entered the aisle. But Henry didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He turned toward the crew jump seat, his voice a calm indictment. Miss Bennett, you're relieved of all passenger-facing duties, immediately. Sophia staggered back a step, caught between disbelief and the weight of consequences she had never expected to catch up to her. Lucas hesitated, then finally moved to take her badge and headset, the ceremonial end of a chapter no apology could edit. You can't be serious, she whispered. I've worked here for 7 years. Henry met her eyes. And in 7 seconds, you let bias cancel them all. The weight of those words hit harder than turbulence. Because this wasn't just a job termination, it was a cultural one. For years, microaggressions got waved off as misunderstandings. Verbal slights got swallowed by policy manuals. But now a hoodie was doing what decades of silence couldn't, forcing a reckoning at 30,000 feet. And that reckoning didn't stop at Sophia. Henry turned to Lucas. As lead attendant, you co-signed her claim without verification. You repeated her error instead of correcting it. You will not be terminated, but you will be reassigned to compliance and ethics review until internal audit clears your record. Lucas nodded slowly, eyes down, hands folded, like a student waiting for judgment. Then came Ethan, leaning back, arms crossed, still smug. So what? Now I'm next? Henry didn't answer with sarcasm. He answered with structure. You're not an employee, so I can't fire you, but I can invoke Skylight's flight discretion protocol. He pulled up the airline policy with one hand, scrolling to the clause like it was waiting for him. Effective immediately, you are banned from flying Skylight or its affiliates indefinitely. Your comments were discriminatory, inflammatory, and disruptive to passenger safety. Ethan shot up from his seat. You're banning me? For what? Saying what everyone else is thinking. Harper, still filming, stood now. No, Mr. Ward. He's banning you for being the loudest coward in the room. Security had been called off minutes ago, but now the whole cabin was watching, as if justice itself had become the in-flight entertainment. Lucas tried to step forward, stammering, There's something you should know. Henry turned. Say it. Lucas looked at the manifest tablet in his hands. There've been other complaints, similar ones, passengers, outfits, profiling. We flagged them as confusion. We didn't forward them to corporate. A hush dropped so heavy you could hear hearts beat. You suppressed bias complaints? Harper asked, voice sharp. Lucas nodded. We thought we were protecting ourselves, but we were protecting a lie. That line? That was the confession no one expected, and the scandal no airline could afford. Henry turned to Mateo. Start an audit. Internal complaint logs, last 12 months. I want every buried report uncovered and corrected. Mateo was already typing. On it. And just like that, what started as a seat dispute had cracked open a hidden ledger of prejudice. And Henry wasn't walking away. He was walking through it, name by name, case by case. This wasn't about revenge. This was about reform, about tearing down the wall between assumed authority and silent accountability. Now, if this story is waking something up inside you, don't let it pass. Don't sit quietly when silence is the weapon. If you've ever had your worth measured by your wardrobe, your tone, or your zip code, like this story, comment with one time you were judged before you spoke, and subscribe if you believe that change doesn't need a press conference. It just needs a seat, a name, and a truth no one can scroll past. Because sometimes the hoodie isn't hiding anything, sometimes it's the uniform of a revolution. The storm should have ended there, a wrongful accusation, a corporate clapback, and two people facing consequences. But Henry wasn't looking for theater. He was digging for the roots. And what he uncovered next wasn't a bad apple. It was the orchard. As he stood in the aisle, Lucas spoke again, his voice hollow but urgent. There's something else. Passengers weren't the only ones affected. That caught Harper's attention. She stepped closer, camera still rolling, her voice low. Say it on record. Lucas looked around nervously, then down at the manifest tablet in his hands, his fingers trembling slightly. Crew members, we were warned. Off the record. Too many bias flags? You lose your bonus, your route, your promotion. Sophia, now seated near the galley with her badge surrendered, finally looked up. Her voice was low, almost human now. We weren't told to discriminate. We were told to protect the airline's image. Quietly. So we started fixing complaints before they made it to corporate. Mateo stopped logging. His eyes snapped up. You suppressed evidence? Lucas nodded. We didn't see it that way. We saw it as filtering noise. But that noise was people. Jack Hayes, seated mid-cabin, stood up again. You thought loyalty meant silence, but all it did was feed a sickness. Henry didn't need to respond yet. He was letting the weight of the truth fall from their own lips. But the truth wasn't done unraveling. Harper asked, how many complaints were scrubbed? Lucas hesitated. 6, just in my shift cycle. I heard rumors of more, maybe dozens company-wide. Henry turned slowly to Mateo. Begin the compliance breach log. This goes all the way back, 12 months. No cover-ups, no edits. Every erased report, every buried flag, I want it restored. Mateo tapped furiously. Internal audit activated, executive flag triggered. We'll notify compliance and HR by end of day. But then something none of them expected happened. Sophia, eyes wet, voice cracking, stood. It wasn't always like this. We were scared. That's how it starts. You see one person get punished for reporting, and then you learn to look away. Henry didn't gloat. He listened. Because he'd seen it before. In boardrooms, in tech firms, in partnerships where silence bought promotions. Fear doesn't just keep people quiet, he said. It builds policy without printing a single page. He stepped closer. And if a crew is taught to see hoodies as threats, or accents as risk, or color as confirmation of doubt, then your training isn't broken, your culture is. Sophia flinched, not from his tone, but from the truth it delivered. She nodded. We were rewarded for it. Informally, unofficially, but we knew, and we kept doing it. The emotional loop pulled the cabin tight again. Passengers weren't angry anymore, they were stunned. Not at Henry, but at the realization that this wasn't rare. This was regular. Harper whispered, if this stays internal, it dies in a footnote. But if we show it all, the footage, the audio, the logs, it becomes reform. Henry nodded. Then we show it all, no redactions. And just like that, the fight evolved. It wasn't about a seat anymore. It was about airspace, about how many people get grounded before they even board, because someone with a badge and a fear reflex made a decision in 2 seconds flat. Jack Hayes clapped once. If this is the new skylight, I'll keep flying. A murmur of agreement rippled through the cabin. Mateo looked up. HR just confirmed your authority is upheld, terminations are locked, sanctions approved. Henry turned to Lucas. You'll stay grounded through the audit. Not out of punishment, but because you owe the truth your full attention. Every erased line is a name we failed. Lucas swallowed hard. Yes, sir. Now, let me ask you, the person listening. Have you ever watched someone walk into a room and get treated like a stranger in their own story? Have you ever had to dress safer, smile longer, or speak softer just to be accepted? If that hits somewhere deep, don't let it sit in silence. Like this video, drop a comment, tell your story, and subscribe, because this isn't fiction. This is what it looks like when the curtain gets pulled back and the pattern finally sees the light. We're not done. We're just getting to the part they never thought would be filmed. By the time Skylight Flight AC-247 touched down at JFK, the quiet wasn't peace, it was processing. Not a soul forgot what happened at 30,000 feet. Sophia was escorted off the plane not by security but by consequence. Her access revoked, her headset surrendered, her title reduced to a memory. Lucas, still pale, remained grounded under formal audit, holding on to the last thin strand of redemption, cooperation. Ethan Ward, once the voice of entitled sarcasm, was met at the jet bridge by legal counsel and a printed notice. Permanent no-fly status. No debate, no warning. The airline system that once protected whispers had finally shouted back. But this wasn't about punishment. It never really was. That's what made Henry's next move so unexpected. He didn't call a press conference. He didn't pose for a headline. Instead, he responded to an email. A former Skylight employee who'd left 2 years earlier wrote, "I saw what happened, and I need to tell you. Sophia wasn't wrong about the culture. We filtered complaints to protect ourselves. I filed 3 and was warned each time, so I stopped." Henry read that message twice, then responded with 6 words that changed everything. "Let's talk. We're rebuilding trust. Together." That former employee was rehired within a week as part of Skylight's new ethics unit. Their first job? Open every complaint file from the past 3 years and count how many stories had been quietly buried under misunderstanding. And while that work happened behind the scenes, Henry made a louder move in silence. He launched Skyfair, a full-scale, no-exemption accountability initiative. Every gate agent, every crew member, every lounge attendant retrained within 60 days. Every complaint logged instantly. No more verbal shrugs, no more invisible filters. Harper's footage became the centerpiece of the training, unedited, uncut. Because sometimes the story doesn't need polishing, it needs to sting. Within a month, customer satisfaction reached historic highs. Not because the seats got wider or the snacks got better, but because the silence got broken. Flyers emailed, saying they no longer dressed up just to get treated like people. Crew members admitted they'd begun seeing passengers differently. Gate agents paused, just long enough to remember that a hoodie wasn't a threat. It was just cotton. One uniformed employee during retraining said, "I never knew how many assumptions I made until I watched that video. It was like hearing my own thoughts play back with a courtroom transcript." That's what Henry built, not a PR campaign, but a mirror. Harper refused any title or paycheck. She agreed to consult only if the airline played the video raw, real, timestamped. "Don't spin it," she said. "Play it. Let them feel what it's like to be profiled in public and still rise with your name intact." And they did. New hires watched it. Veteran staff watched it. Executives, even those who thought themselves immune, sat through it in silence. Some cried. Others squirmed. But no one left unchanged. Mateo Cruz, Henry's quiet but relentless right hand, was promoted to executive liaison for ethics and transparency. His job wasn't to speak louder, it was to make sure the quiet never again drowned the truth. And Henry? He kept flying. But this time, every time he walked onto a Skylight aircraft, something subtle shifted. Not because of his status, but because now every cabin crew had seen the video. They knew who he was, not just by name, but by action. He sat in seat 2A, not because it made him special, but because he made it safe. And when passengers asked him quietly, "Did that really happen?" he'd nod and say, "It still is. That's why we fix it." He wasn't flying to be above anyone. He was flying to prove that dignity should never need a dress code. In one moment near the end of that year, Henry boarded a red-eye flight wearing the same hoodie. The gate agent looked up, paused, then smiled. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Carter. Thank you for your work." And in that moment, a ripple of justice passed through the air like altitude adjusting itself. One voice, one phone, one refusal to move from a seat that was rightfully his. That's what changed it. That's what wrote the new policy. Not from the top floor, but from aisle 2. Now to you, the listener, the viewer, the person who's made it to this final chapter. You know this isn't just about a flight. It's about how systems stay broken until someone names the cracks. It's about how silence gets traded for safety and how comfort too often depends on who's being made uncomfortable. If you've ever been told you don't belong because of how you look, what you wear, or where you came from, this is your story too. So take a stand right now, like this story, not for the algorithm, but for every person who ever had to prove they deserved to sit down. Comment with a time you saw bias dressed up as policy. And subscribe, because the only thing more powerful than one voice is a community that never lets it get silenced again.